Hello there guys, and welcome to another one of my reviews. Today we're driving a sort of hybrid in more than one sense of the word. Today we are driving the Suzuki Across. Now you might look at the images in this video and think to yourself, doesn't that look mightily familiar? Where do I know this car from? Well, you wouldn't be wrong, because this car is a Toyota in a Suzuki shell. Basically, this is a Toyota Rav4 that has been rebranded and rebadged to be sold as a Suzuki Across. Now, there are a couple of reasons why that has happened, and it isn't the first time we've seen it. I mean, we've seen Toyota working with Subaru before, with Mazda, and so on. So these kind of collaborations between brands happen all the time. Now, a while back, Toyota bought some shares into Suzuki. And of course, when Suzuki makes a profit, Toyota makes a profit as well. Suzuki found itself at the wrong end of a very long stick earlier this year, because the European Union changed the way it allows, or the intervals in which it allows car manufacturers to sell cars in the EU related to the emissions. So they tightened the legislation in the emission field, and of course that had immediate consequences. Basically, Suzuki couldn't sell any more cars in the EU because its fleet average CO2 emissions were over the limit. And I mean, they could sell it, but the fines would be so high that they would go bankrupt. So Toyota intervened and offered them a couple of their own hybrids to be sold under the Suzuki badge in Europe. So now, if you look in certain countries, not everywhere around Europe, if you look at the Suzuki configurators online, you might find cars like the Suzuki Across, like the one we're driving, or the Suzuki Sways, which is basically a Toyota Corolla Touring Sports that was rebranded. So what about the Across that we're driving today? Well, it's a plug-in hybrid version of the Toyota Rav4. The Rav4 is offered in a hybrid version in a lot of countries, but the plug-in hybrid version is limited to certain spaces. And normally, since this is an international review, normally in the countries where you will find the Toyota Rav4 as a plug-in hybrid, you wouldn't find the Suzuki Across. And where you would find the Suzuki Across, which is a plug-in hybrid by definition, you wouldn't find a plug-in hybrid version of the Toyota, because the two companies really don't want to step on each other's toes there. So that said, the Suzuki Across is a very good choice because it shares its underpinnings with the Rav4. In terms of design on the outside, you'll notice slight changes compared to the car this is based on, and they will be mostly limited to the front end. That's where the bumper has a slightly different shape, and the headlights are a bit rounded off, and so on. But from the sides and in the back, you would be forgiven for mistaking this for a Rav4. If you didn't have the Suzuki stickers on, this would easily pass as a Toyota Rav4. Another key difference is the extra hubcap, the extra fuel cap on the rear right side, which is there to allow you to plug this car in and recharge its battery. Now, let's talk about the interior design, which is once again very similar to what you would find in the Rav4. There are no differences whatsoever inside, apart from the Suzuki badge on the steering wheel, but other than that, everything is the same. And I have to say, this car has a great build quality. The materials feel nice to the touch. It feels well built. You have soft touch leather on the top of the door panels, all the way up to the middle of the door panel. You have some tougher plastics on the lower side, but that's not a big issue. You also have this soft touch plastic everywhere on the dash, and it looks and feels nice to the touch. I love the fact that we have this big chunky HVAC control system over here with these big dials that are rounded off and wearing some ultra grippy rubber on them. The instrument cluster is classical. It has an analog part and a digital part. on the left side of the screen, you'll find an analog indicator for the for how efficient you are driving. It tells you if you're on the power all the time, or whether you're more eco-friendly in the way you treat the gas pedal. On the right side you have the battery indicator and the fuel indicator, and right in the middle you have a screen with all sorts of info. Even the fonts are the same and the menu is the same as on the Toyota. What I can't complain about is the infotainment screen, which is pretty bulky, and the resolution is bad, the menu is bad, it feels really old, Windows 95 old. But the good part is that you do get Apple CarPlay connectivity and Android Auto via an USB port located down there, and that's fine. This is the gear shift lever wrapped in leather, all good over here, and next to it you have buttons controlling the various driving modes of the car. I'm going to talk about that later on. The seats are also a point I want to highlight. They are incredibly comfortable, look really good. I think they look better than the ones in the Rav4. Wrapped in ecological leather and textile material, they do the job perfectly. In the back you have plenty of space. Even for a guy as big as me, you can fit 4 adults no problem. And I like the fact that the transmission tunnel, even though there's no drive shaft underneath here, is rather low and has a plastic cover to keep it protected from threading over it while you shift in the back. So let's talk about the technical side of things. Well, this car has no less than 3 power sources. It has an internal combustion engine under the hood, which is a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder Atkinson cycle petrol engine. You also have an electric motor up front, which is capable of delivering 182 horsepower. The internal combustion engine can deliver 185 horsepower. And you also have an electric motor on the rear axle alone, which can deliver up to 54 horsepower. Now, if you do the math, you might think that this car has over 400 horsepower, but that's not the case. As it happens in many hybrid models, especially plug-in hybrids, you can't just add up all those numbers, because the car can't offer the maximum output of each motor at the same time. So you can get up to 306 horsepower out of this setup and up to 270 Newton meters of torque. Those figures are actually not that bad for a car of this size and this weight. The car will tip the scale at about 2 tons and will do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 6 seconds flat, which is fast. It's just that it doesn't feel fast, and that's because of the transmission. It has a ECVT gearbox, which, as you may very well know, is not exactly known for its feeling. It's not known for the way it feels when you want to drive sporty. What it's known for is the drone engine you get inside the cabin when you accelerate hard. And that happens on this car too. When you accelerate, the engine will rev up to its optimal rev range and keep itself over there while the car simply accelerates. So there's a disconnection between how hard you press on the gas pedal and what kind of noises are coming from under the hood. But that's not really a big issue, because this being a plug-in hybrid model, it has plenty of electric power to get you around easily. So you'll only hear the engine rarely and whenever you are just too anxious in pressing the gas pedal. But the car is fast in a straight line. It will show its weight in the corners, so you can't really expect this car to behave as like a Supra, for example. It will understeer and it will lean quite a lot in the corners, but that's fine. Nobody really expects this car to behave like a BMW X3M, for example. What I did notice is that it is incredibly comfortable, even though we have 19-inch wheels on this car, which are at the upper part of the limit in terms of wheel sizes you can fit on this platform. And it soaks up the bumps really nicely, especially for a passive setup, and especially for a car that doesn't have air suspension. There's a McPherson setup up front that does its job really, really well. So you might want to keep that in mind. So you have plenty of space. plenty of comfort. What's there left to say? Oh, well, the battery and the plug-in setup. Well, just like any other plug-in, you need to charge this car in order for it to be efficient. Suzuki says that you can do about 75 kilometers with a single charge with this car. I didn't get that far, but I did get about 60-64 kilometers of range out of a full battery, which is actually pretty nice. It's pretty close to the claimed figures, and I think it will be enough for most people. You have an 18 kilowatt battery in the back, which can be recharged using a 3.6 kilowatt charger. That means it will take about 5 hours to have it replenished to 100%. You can also use the internal combustion engine to recharge it. You can hold this button over here, and the car will use the gas in the tank to recharge the battery. Or you can just leave it in auto EV mode, which basically means the car will choose the power source it uses to move around. Normally when you set off, the car sets off in electric mode until it depletes the battery, and after that the internal combustion engine will kick on. But as I said, you get 60 kilometers of range out of it, and that should be enough for your daily commute anyway. You can drive this car in EV mode up to 140 kilometers an hour, which is more than enough. But you should know that at that kind of speed, the range will drop significantly. But even when the battery runs out, you still drive this car as a hybrid. And I noticed that around town, the average fuel consumption was under 7 liters per 100 kilometers covered, which is amazing for a car of this size with 300 horsepower. Outside the city limit, the fuel consumption was yet again around 6 liters per 100 kilometers covered with an average speed of 80 kilometers an hour. And on the highway, that level went up to about 7 liters, 7.5 liters at 130 kilometers an hour, which is the average speed limit here in Europe. So it is a very efficient car overall, and I really enjoyed it. It's very well sound insulated, and you know what? I really have to commend it. If your lifestyle dictates that you should get a plug-in hybrid, and if you can charge it every day, I think this is a better option than the standard Rav4 model. And if it's available in your country, you should really take it into account. That said, this has been my review of the Suzuki Across. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share, and of course subscribe to keep this channel alive. Until next time, don't forget to feed your passions. Ciao.